Yo, the kids.
Peace to the public and power to the people. My name is Miles Xavier, aka Hazelnut Tones, aka Young Haze. My brother in the building, Chestnut Tones. You know what I'm saying? That's Sway Gila. And this is the All the Way Live podcast where the vulnerable are powerful and the most gangster thing you could do is serve.
Church, that is exactly true, Mr. Miles Xavier. I want to welcome you, everybody else that's listening, our whole Live House family, and everybody that's been rocking with us to the All the Way Live podcast. And what we do over here, man, is we give people that carefully curated content for their cranium. My brother and I dedicate ourselves to researching and unpacking some of the more difficult current topics that are happening. We've been unpacking Ukraine that's been happening. We've been engaging with some of the activists and the folks that are doing that good work over there, you know, staying true to our word. We apply ourselves. We apply ourselves, and we do it for one reason, Mr. Miles Xavier.
Big facts. One reason only.
There's only one reason that we do this for, and that reason is to be a space of positivity, is to be a space of motivation, and is to be a space where people can come through, take a bit of this energy, man, and keep going through their day, because we know people are going through it. We know that mental health is at an all-time low. We know that depression is at an all-time high. We know loneliness is at an all-time high. All of these things, man. And if we can be that for you, for even a second, then we would have done our job over here, man. So welcome to the shout.
Yes, sir. We are a handshake, a hug, a hold you down for an hour a week. This is the All the Way Live podcast, which means that Joe Berg is in the building by way of Exeter. You know what I'm saying? My brother is here, which is so important today. We're going to get into that in a real way today. I'm so excited. But you already know what's going on. Chicago is in the building. This podcast is recorded on stolen land. This land was cared for by the Potawatomi people, and the violence done to remove them from this land is inseparable from the violence that we see in this city today, this country today, and this world today. So with that, we lift up love for indigenous people the world over. We lift up love between black and brown people the world over. We forming coalitions. We making things happen. We're trying to connect to the people that are doing the work. We got some exciting news about that too. Like, it's really real out here. That's the intro, man. Let's get into the show.
Yeah, I get that, but is we live though? Is we like all the way live though? You heard?
Mr. Miles Xavier, what we do over here at the show, man, is we like to highlight some of the people that are doing that good work, people that are out there in the field, in their communities. Community work is a big part of what we do in our personal lives, big part of what we do in our professional lives. And so we like to lift up people that are doing that stuff, man. This week, we are sharing the work done by the folks in Chicago, Good Kids, Mad City, and Englewood.
Yes, sir. I love how you brought us in too, because this is a point where our personal life and our professional life connect in a big way, right? Even the title, Good Kids, Mad City, is a reference to Kendrick Lamar's album. We're big fans of Kendrick. Shout out to YouTube audience to see the TDE gear that my guy is right now. You know what I'm saying? Like, so that album means a lot to us. Apparently, it meant a lot to a group of youth in Chicago as well who formed Good Kids, Mad City. It's a youth-led organization that aims to bring resources to underserved communities and promote safety by emphasizing community empowerment, right? And I've just been amazed and humbled by the work that they've been able to do as I've started to wade into the network of community support in Chicago as an aspiring organizer. And everywhere, all the spaces that I've been called to be at, they've been there, organized, right? And this is a group of young people. So their list of services that they provide to the community includes a leadership development curriculum for these young people that are getting civically engaged in their communities, interactive volunteer projects, job training. They have a food pantry. So you already seeing, bro, a lot of overlap from the things we do. So this is an organization that I thought it was important to shout out.
That's incredible. That's absolutely incredible work. Shout out to Good Kids Mad City. It's always very encouraging when there is a time for the organized people, at least let me say the organized organizations, when there's a call for them to step up, and they do, and they do so in such a professional manner, and in such a high standard. I think that's always very cool to see. I think that increases everybody in the field has to be able to adjust to that, because they're a point of reference for people to look at in terms of how to model themselves organization wise on how to do the same type of thing, man. So it's dope to see that being led by young people that care about their city.
Yeah, fire that you mentioned, that organization, like in the model too, right? They have a diversified leadership model, which means when you go to their website, there's no like about us that has like, oh, this is the person that's leading it. This is really a collective of youth that have really like found a way to have impact as a group, right? And that kind of the who's in charge, who's leading it fluctuates, and the emphasis is on the work, right? So that's amazing. In itself, right? So, and also when you talk about the professionalism of an organization, especially in nonprofit, it's about having the demands at the forefront, like the clear things that you want, right? So, a couple of the things that I've come across that they're advocating for is one of them is their peace book ordinance, which is to reallocate 2% of the police budget towards mental health services and school resources and other basic necessities in communities that are overlooked in Chicago and discriminated against, right? So that is like a very clear thing that they're working towards. They have on their website links to be able to donate and support a lot of the different initiatives that they have going on. So go check them out. It's a GKMC18 at on Instagram and Twitter. So go check them out. Amazing work, bro.
Yeah, and it's always so important to be able to highlight this type of thing. Miles, you were busy saying about their particular initiative of the 2%. What does it look like in practice in order to be able to get something like that to actually happen and go through? And where are they in the process, if you know?
I'm not sure where they are in the process as of now. If anybody from Good Kids is hearing this or is in connection with me, hook me up, let me know what's going on. But I know that one way that you achieve that is pressure, bro. You apply pressure and you apply that pressure consistently. So you call for this and you look at what's happening. Like earlier last year, Lori Lightfoot allocated $250 million of COVID relief towards the Chicago Police Department, right? Like that's a lot of money going towards the boys in blue, and communities are saying that they need that money, and they know of organizations, that there are stakeholders that are standing up, that are closer to the public, that maybe can use that money in a way that uplifts people, in a way that people want that money to be allocated. So if we're hearing things like this, we know where the money's not going where we want it to go, continuing to call that out, continuing to be vocal about that is one way. And so I just think that this organization is amazing, because the other way you do that is you continue to educate people around you, right? So they have education platforms to inform people about what these ordinances, these policy level things that they want to advocate for are, but also to advocate for people in the meantime while we address these policy issues, to learn how to take care of themselves in the community. So they do this thing called treatment, not trauma, which would redirect mental health crises calls to mental health professionals instead of relying on ineffective policing. They're finding solutions that are community based, right? Rather than relying on these institutions. But we still holding these institutions accountable for both the funding that our tax dollars and where that's going, and for the harm that they're doing in our communities.
And this is stemming from a push from the Black Lives Matter movement, where the big call to justice in that movement was defunding the police, specifically in Chicago. Now, I can't say that's something particularly that I agree with in the sense of defunding the police and how it was stated, but I do agree that there does need to be a reallocation of how those funds are distributed, specifically to schools in Chicago.
Wait a minute. You just said the same. You just said two opposite things. You said you disagree with defunding the police, but you think that the funds should be redistributed.
I said defunding the police how it was prescribed in the movement, which was complete defunding of the police. And I said I don't agree with complete defunding of the police. I do believe in redistribution of funds, though, which doesn't mean that the police get totally defunded, but that budget is also allocated towards specifically schools in Chicago.
Well, there's multiple conversations. I just want to be clear that Good Kids Mad City, their proposal was that 2% of the police budget, which I think
that's what I like.
Was $35 million, which is crazy, right? But like there's levels to this, because I wouldn't be so quick to dismiss abolition movements of the police, right? Because a lot of times when people hear abolition, they hear the complete removal of police. But actually what abolition movements and abolitionist teaching is about is how do we create the structures that mean that we no longer need police, right? What does it look like to actually put and invest in the different programs that support people from a people-focused perspective, right? Like in terms of mental health care services, in terms of responses to mental health crises, right, in real time, in terms of not addressing drug addiction problems or problems that really are to do with structural and social work issues as criminal issues, right? So when we say, a lot of people get real when you say abolish or defund the police, a lot of people jump to like, we're gonna wake up tomorrow and there's no police, who gonna protect me? But that's really not that's a really quick thought. It's really about how do we create a society where we as communities care for each other, where police aren't as necessary. And also thinking about what do police really do well right now.
Yeah.
So I just wouldn't be so quick. That's what I'm saying.
Thanks for that clarity. That is a big distinction in how abolition movements actually like apply in practice, which is investing in things around the community that make it less dependent on police presence. But it does get difficult in a place like Chicago, specifically the South Side, and in a lot of communities of people of color in the US, is that they're heavily policed in a way that is not fitting that is not equally distributed. So a big part of that is also why there is the largest number of people in prisons are people of color, specifically Black men, and that speaks towards how broken the policing system is at the moment.
Big facts. And yeah, there's different contexts to policing internationally, but yeah, I think it's just important to think about, like, when I look at the police, I see one job that has 100 different jobs in it, right? And so my thought when you hear defund the police, it is an aggressive statement, in the sense that there is a need for accountability for the harm that police have brought to communities, particularly in the context of the United States, and particularly in the context of communities of color in the United States. So there is a call for that. And so people, when structures are attacked aggressively, people respond in a way that represents like our nervousness and our desire for things to stay the same in a lot of ways. So I understand, especially with an international context, that removing the police in a lot of ways seems like an issue that's something that's untenable. But we got to think about think about the capacity of our communities, right? Take a strengths-based approach and look at but what could we do? How in a place like Chicago, which you mentioned, right? We have all of these shootings, we have all of this violence going on, and we think if we remove police, it'll be so much worse. But actually, how effective are they being in preventing violence? They're not, right?
But you have to look at what happened in New York after the police. A big portion of the police just effectively decided not to work following the Black Lives Matter strikes, and gun rates went through the roof, stabbing rates, robberies, crime was out.
Scenario. That's exactly. See, when you remove something like that, and when you remove the police because the police said we're not going to show up to work or something like that, of course that's what you're going to have happen. But that's exactly the opposite of what I'm talking about. I'm talking about putting structures in place in preparation with the intention to support the communities without the removal of without police in them before you remove police, right? So there's a big difference between the police quitting and saying, oh, hey, look at what happens when we refuse to patrol the streets one day, and saying, actually, we're going to look at, from a policy perspective, at how much money of taxpayers' money gets allocated where in this city. And actually, we're going to redistribute it so that the things that address the root causes of violence, the reason people commit robberies, right? You ain't got no money, rob somebody with some money, right? When we talk about the people that are hungry, the people that are mentally ill, the people that could actually be addressed if social workers got some of those millions, right? If trauma-informed mental health care professionals got some of those millions of dollars, right? If workforce development, people that were working to put jobs together for people that have been justice involved, or who the education system has allowed to fall through the cracks, if those people had millions of dollars, and we gave those people those millions of dollars first, and then started to look at what it looks like to remove the over surveillance and over criminalization of people of color in these communities in an intentional way, not just we quit one day, but let's think about this. What could we
Yeah, it's quite particular in the US because, again, people of color are the minority in the US, and so a large percentage of the population is quite unaware, if you will, of the realities that some people face, and to them that issue is as real as a war in Ukraine, where it is a atrocity, and sure, you can feel bad about it, but because it's not near you and you're quite removed from it, you'll never have to engage with it, therefore it doesn't exist. And so the type of momentum it would take to galvanize, like we saw in the Black Lives Matter movement, you need that same level of push, but from a infrastructure, from an institutional level, where you're now doing things like you've mentioned, which is going through the process of setting up the funds that will go to help the community, because in that there's a process in there and how it's received. And you're somebody that applies for these types of grants, and you work at the high level with institutions that work with these sorts of cash, the money that comes in to help the community. Do you think that organizations now could accommodate that type of influx of cash, or would it be a case where there's a lot of thievery that happens in it, or is it something that is that can happen like this? More money equals more impact.
I think in the United States, you have a situation where the organizations that want to have that impact are all clamoring for a small amount of funds, which puts them in competition for each other. So I think if you increase that pool of funds, then and you look at the people who have a track record of doing the work, and these organizations are serious. These are organizations that have put evidence-based practices into their work in an effort to be competitive for these funds. So they are prepared in a lot of ways to accept these funds, right? I'm not saying that every program is going to have the exact impact that it proposes to have. I'm not going to say that there aren't complications when there's a huge influx of money, and that some people aren't going to abuse that, right? But what I am saying is that we have invested so much money in policing, and we've invested so much money in the status quo, that we're now at a point where that's clearly not working. Violence continues to go up, right? And it continues to get worse, continues to diversify, right? From just shootings that are gang involved to now carjackings, right, of innocent people. And putting the pressure on the communities putting more pressure on these communities has not been the solution, right? So we need to invest in them. Like, I love the policy clarity of Good Kids Mad City's call. 2%. Start with 2%. And when 2% is millions, okay, but you have to also be prepared for when that starts to work, to continue to defund the police, right? And again, defund is aggressive language because there's accountability that they have to have, and particularly in this American context, particularly in the Chicago context. Shout out to the Chicago Torture Justice Museum, from victims of violence that the police have perpetrated against Chicagoans, right? So like, there's a deep history of abuse of police power here, and there is a wealth of data and information that shows that a shift toward investing in other things can have a positive effect on violence.
On that note of positive effect, I think we have segued almost perfectly into the next section of this content that we have curated for people.
Yeah, let's go.
Yo, the kids official sliding on the instrumental. Nordic combos, twist your mental like forbidden jitsus. My click's initial.
Psych.
Leave it in. Leave that in. I like it. Yo, I can't lie, man. I've been excited for this all week, bro. I've been excited for this right here, man. Listen. Uh, Today on our Stumble Upon segment, we are going to find out a little bit about each other, or at least share a little bit of each other with the world, and I think that's beautiful. Can I start? Can we spotlight you first?
For sure. And if we're just, letting the folks know exactly what it is we're going to be getting into, is for this particular stumble upon section, we figured that we'd open up this conversation into, like you said, sharing ourselves, and kind of interviewing each other. So as always, this over here is an open conversation. So do feel free to jump into the chats if you have questions. We'll read them live, and we can all engage and open this conversation even further. I like the questions that you had. I almost want to mirror them, but definitely, please do start. I'll be more than happy to be the first interviewee.
Dope. All right, so like, let me get right, because this is gonna be important one day. Like, this is gonna be like archived, museumed, documentaryatized. Like, this is important, right? So please state your name for the record.
Oh man, this is a police investigation, is what it is. I've seen enough of those. I've seen enough of those.
Police. That's what we do while we edit the podcast. We watch police investigation videos. So this also have a tint of that. It's gonna be great.
And if you also want to go down that rabbit hole, that JCS, it's that's the name of the channel, JCS. They're interviewing these dudes. It's crazy.
It's nuts. All right, sir. State your name.
Zula Kegila, aka Chestnut Tones.
I appreciate that. So my guy, like, this has been you lived in Venezuela, you've lived in Germany, you've lived in South Africa, you've lived in the United States, you've lived in Scotland. Where's home for you, and what does home mean to you?
Home is home is a very fluid concept, right? Home is definitely where there's people that care. Home is where home is. It's funny when they say home is where you can use the bathroom comfortably. it's the term, and that's where home is. And I think in as you mentioned, those journeys, what's been incredible has that the universe has always provided me with a home. And I think that's a big part of our relationship and our friendship, is that your family took me in and made a home, and opened up a home to me. And my family was happily able to do the same thing for you. And because of that, Chicago is home for me. So that's what it is. But home, South Africa, Chicago as well, I'd have to say.
Yes, I appreciate, like, it's more than mutual. One of the biggest, like, changes in my life was coming to Africa and finding home there, right? And in the way that I hope that we've provided home for you this side in Chicago. So that's dope, man. So it's been a non-linear path. There's a lot of dots on the map there. Can you describe how you got to where you are right now as someone who's focused on impact? And please don't leave out the cameras and the private jets and like seriously, like the shift from Mandulo Capital to Mandulo Foundation. I think some of the choices you've made are important for people to hear.
and I laugh because you've been there each step of the journey. So you've seen you've watched this journey very closely as we have each other's. And if I'm being as succinct as I can be with all of that, it really has just been a moment of being very fortunate, man. It's really been a series of very, very fortunate events. One of those fortunate events was, at least where the turning point is that I believe you found your purpose of impact at the same time that I found my purpose of impact. And because of that, we're able to form a very strong bond around that. And so I think how I define things is pre that moment and post that moment right now. You got BC and AD. That's not before COVID.
Community, but after community focus. I like it. I like it. It's spot on.
That's what it's been, in that journey, there's been, I think at some point it became an exercise of an entrepreneurial route of just trying to do things by ourselves, by myself, whatever the case is. And then before that, it was just going through the process of corporate and moving through that. And I think one of the cool things is reaching what felt like a peak in corporate allowed me to see things in a way about what really matters and allowed me to question myself in terms of what matters. Like you said, there was the jets, there was the lights. It was fun. It was a bunch of fun. Um, but also at the same time, when you're standing on, when you're standing there, you think to yourself like, all right, what is next? Because this is what would be a serious accomplishment in one's life. What comes next? And that's that AD moment. That's when I think you also were in a place, and I'd love for you to get into that part of your story as well. You were also in a place in corporate, moving quite quite quickly up the ladder, and yet still decided, listen, man, I'm gonna drop this. I'm gonna reject the offers that are coming to me. I'm gonna take that step. You know what I'm saying? So I hope I answered the question.
Yeah, no, I appreciate it. I appreciate it. And like, so I'll answer kind of, I'll share a little bit about what you asked about, like that transition point for me, and then I'll jump back to another question I have for you. But
Are we doing these 3-3? How do you want to do these?
yeah, that's cool. That's cool. That's cool. Do you want me to answer that question, or do you want to start? Do you want to start?
Finish yours because I have so many questions for you too. As excited as you are for it.
But like, so yeah, so that transition point for me was definitely like, I think if I could be vulnerable and powerful in that for a moment.
Amen.
Yep. Leaving college, especially like all the homies, I was the young one, which meant like a bunch of the gang, a bunch of the squad graduated before me. And I think there was this moment of just being like senior, junior, end of junior year, senior in college, and just being like, sure, I have examples in my family, but these are people that I look up to, my older brother, my dad, that have made this transition to like being successful adults, right? As Black men and like through an academic path. And I'm looking like, can I really do this? Is this who I really want to be? Like I studied economics in college, but it didn't really connect with me the way that I thought it would, partly because they're very particular about the type of economics they teach you in these institutions, right? So I just latched on to like, all right, I'm out. Let me get a job. Let me start making some money. Let me build a house. And from there, I can figure out what I want to do. And I started working in this corporate job, which was actually like, for what it was cool. Like people my age, people that were also in that same uncertain position, people I could connect with and do happy hour with. And it was dope. But I was working really, really hard to like make corporations money. And at the same time, I'm being inspired by, reading Cornell West and reading Angela Davis and reading like all of these things that really inspire me are tugging me back towards community. Meanwhile, I left college. I moved to the south side of Chicago, back where like my family is from. So there's tug toward community. And at a certain point, I just realized, well, let me stop putting all this effort in to make corporations money. I made it. I landed. I got a job. I have something on my resume that's the actual company that has employed me. Like it is possible. I'm employable. Now, after 2 years, because it wasn't a right away thing, but after 2 years of doing that, building a little foundation, I was like, let me jump to see if there's an opportunity for me to use these same skills towards something that's community focused. Hard to make that a short answer, but
It is. It is.
yeah.
One thing about you is that you've always been about that, right? And I don't think maybe you had realized it completely, but since I met you many years ago at this point now, you've always been about how do I want to help my community. I don't care what it is. I want to help my community. And going into corporate seemed to be one way to try and help the community. All right, let me get the bag and see how I can help my community
Yep.
do, through getting the bag. And then from there, it was cool to watch your transformation where you're just like, you know what, dude, forget the bag. I'm going right in literally to the community.
Yeah, I think there's a point for, and everybody's calling is different, but there was a point for me when I was examining the ways in which, like, and again, like, this leaked into our last conversation too, but America is a very particular place for Black people. And having been raised in Chicago, in the suburbs, like where I had different, less risk factors, and a lot more, like, doing good in school meant something, right? Like, it was crazy. And having this perspective put me in this position where it was like, all right, well, I feel like I have to give back. And so for me, it wasn't enough to be like, oh, at first it was like, I'm going to be a lawyer that helps. I'm going to be an entrepreneur that helps. And just the way that the life was pulling me was like, nah, help first. Right. Like,
Mm.
uh, I think a big shift in that too was I got to go to UCLA when I was in high school, and I got to hear Lupe Fiasco and Cornel West speak. And it was around the time that Cornel West was really pushing this phrase that has become like synonymous with him, which is, you can't lead the people if you don't love the people, and you can't save the people if you don't serve the people. And I
Mm.
think that was something that I heard early, and then slowly started to manifest in me, where it was like, nah, service has to come first for me. And ever since then, I've been on the path I've been on.
All right, so that kind of like is a perfect starting point for my first question for you. As you say, like this path that you're on, right? So if you Google Miles Xavier now, what you'll find is just a whole bunch of Miles Xavier does this, Miles Xavier doing this. There's going to be mentions of your name and your face doing work and sitting with some of the big decision makers in Chicago. Yet, you I know you, and you're very let's say, you not reserved person, but you're very careful about what you put out there about who you are in your personal life, whatever the case is. But you do so much more than what I think you can just Google about you. So what does Miles Xavier do?
Ah, dope. You beat me to the punch. This was my next question for you. I wanted you to list out some of the different, like, areas and sectors too. So this is perfect. Yeah. Um, I serve the community, like, first and foremost, right? So I try and reduce violence in the community through the Center for Youth Violence Prevention. I'm the project director of that in Chicago. I also just completed a service year with the Chicago Food Depository, which had me tapped into a food pantry that was doing amazing things in Bronzeville and Inglewood. That has me thinking all kinds of, like, dope radical thoughts about how we can connect food pantries as this place where the people who are most in need of service come regularly. But also, like, that place filled me up, not only with ideas, but just like the love that's in that place through the struggle. Both the people serving and receiving was incredible. So I got to mention my work with the Food Depository and with Chosen Tabernacle. Shout out Pastor Gillespie. Both of y'all, you know what I'm saying? It's love. And what else? I'm on the associate board of this organization called Chat, which advocates for speech and language therapy, especially for folks in underserved communities. But actually, just lifting up that speech and language therapy can help so many people in so many different ways. So that's an important part of trying to bring wraparound services to the communities that I work with. Um, I try and tap in as much as I can with the Chicago Race Riots of 1919 project, which is all about acknowledging the history of racial violence in Chicago from the race riot of 1919. We all hear about the Chicago fire. Now, Mrs. O'Leary's cow started a fire in Chicago, but we don't really hear about the race riot. And that actually has value as kind of an origin point historically for racial segregation, and the racial dynamics that keep Chicago as segregated as it is. And so I lift up their work. We're trying to get some art installations throughout the city. Basically, I build capacity for community-led initiatives, right? I try and help them whatever they need, whether it's connecting to other organization, whether it's finding a space, whether it's finding volunteers, whether it's supporting their events, whether it's spreading awareness, whether it's getting a grant together and actually applying for something that like constitutes reparations for a certain community. Like we doing all that, and I'm lucky to be able to be in a position to address all of these different sectors through my work.
Woo! What a list! What a list! And even in there, I know what's in the pipe works. You haven't mentioned this job that you're doing currently right now. You know, you didn't mention some of the other things as well. So, obviously the list goes on, but I think it's great to be able to hear you really put out, you know, what it is in almost totality your involvement with the city that you love and a city that you've made my second home.
Yeah, but speaking of second homes, I can't pass it off to you without this perfect segue of also doing the work in my second home, serving as the director of international outreach for the Mandulo Foundation, which is a big part of my brother's story. So, as you include your titles and all the things that you're working on right now, please bring that one to the forefront too.
For sure, for sure. Obviously, what I do is what I like to call a is being a business creative and a impact creative. I really do see my path and my occupation as a creative experience, and that finds itself in a way of being the director of Mandula Foundation, something that we started in 2018, a NGO that you know we big up, that we talk about and highlight over here often, but an NGO of family, really, you know, the family and the seeing the talent that our joint family has, and seeing the passion that everybody has about impact, and being able to put organization around that, um, to achieve similar goals, you know. So being able to pull that together, our first outing together as a business creative, as an impact creative, was trying to feed people during COVID-19, and we were able to be rather successful with that endeavor. Only in the fact that people were fed, and we expanded that, and then you know we included the food depository, which you were manning that site in Chicago, trying to expand what that impact looks like, and then opening up ourselves to enjoy the spoils of what it feels like to do good work, what it feels like to work hard as a team to achieve good work, and allowing that to shape into the organization that we have now, with a full pipeline of things to do, with a long list of near objectives and a long list of accomplishments that we're racking up and that we're going towards. So there's that element of it, which is a big part of my identity and what I do, because it all centers around impact. And you know, from that, co-founder of Chummy, which is a an e-commerce solution in Namibia, specifically thinking, if you think at the moment Uber Eats, you know, that's essentially is what it is. But we've got so many, even in there, we're what we're trying to build is a platform that allows people to be able to make money. You know, we want the drivers to be able to make money, the merchants to be able to make money, the people that we hire to be able to make money, and really grow this into an opportunity for people that in Namibia is the second highest unemployment rates in the world. So understanding what that community needs, and then again being fortunate to stumble into um, this type of thing. Really, the universe just keeps laying these types of opportunities out, and from there, you know, we the journey is the journey is long. We've got uh, the our coming startup right now. We're in the middle of prototyping a new whole new idea and product that we're going to be bringing out into the market around investing and ethical investing and sustainability, bringing the truth of information to people, allowing them to invest in exotic currencies, you know, really taking this idea of impact and of ethics and of sustainability and of making a change and applying that to every different outlet that we have in a creative manner. So the calendar is full, but so is the list of things that we're doing to change our communities.
Yes, sir. So as you look at this like fleet of ships at which you are like the captain or the first mate, Like you're heavily involved at the helm. What would you say is like your overall mission? You know what I mean?
That's such a good question. That's such a good question. What I'd have to say my overall mission is to continue to adhere to what the universe is. I understand that the universe operates in kindness, right? And I also understand that everything that we do now with the right intention lays a foundation for somebody else to do something great. It could be, it could be just a simple opportunity like we did recently of being able to get a young lady a scholarship from an orphanage and then give her a laptop, like completely believing like this child can really change the world, and trying to get them to be able to believe it too, and doing what we can to spend time with these kids and help them realize like, hey, the limitations to what you want to become are just dependent on what you're willing to do, that what you're willing to do to get there. And so my mission, I believe, is to be able to bring that type of opportunity to as many children as possible. And I would like for that to be my contribution towards my tenure here on this rock that we all share.
Yeah, I love the way that the way that you phrase that, because that is so true to how I see you operate. You know what I mean? Like, so as you think about bringing resources to communities and kids that don't have access, what are your thoughts on why these disparities in access exist in the first place? And how do we address like the root cause of why you got to go give somebody a laptop rather than why they don't, you know?
Yeah, and you're stealing my question time, by the way, too. You totally stealing my question time because I got some.
This one, I got to hear what you got to say. I got to.
And, so the question is, what do I think are the causes of what we're seeing?
Yeah, like, yeah, why is like everything you described is bringing people the resources that they need to survive, food, right? Giving them access to technology, the resources that they need to compete in a modern environment. But you're addressing all of these disparities, it seems like, all of these gaps, all of these like why does Soweto look like it does? You know what I mean? Like why is it up to you and Chills and Mo and P and all the other organizations that are for the people to come and fix this?
It's the beautiful thing about perspective and the beautiful thing about being able to do the work that we do, spreading across Chicago and South Africa. And something we joke about all the time is connecting the diaspora, and seeing what that actually looks like. But the issues tend to be very similar. Maybe the way in which the actions that follow the issue are different, but the underlying issues are quite the same, in that there is a significant lack of infrastructure and capital support in certain communities. And what then happens from there is a almost predictable path of how families are put together and or how families are split apart, about the educational opportunities that children are able to have access to, and what that means. A great study by Malcolm Gladwell was that they looked at the top, they were looking at the kids with the highest IQs from the age of 5, and it was a long blown study all the way up until the age of, I think, about 30, 40. And so in that time, what they did is all the kids with the highest IQs, they wanted to see what ends up happening to the kids that score the highest on test scores and whatever, and are over statistically more intelligent than the rest of the kids. And over time, it fluctuates in terms of what people end up becoming. The key determinant of which one of those kids would not be able to succeed was income, family household income, right? So poverty was literally the biggest determining factor in that study of whether a child is able to succeed or not. And understanding that type of statistic is, that I think that's what gets to the root of that issue, is the fact that you restrict some things within a community, and this is what ends up happening, which
So,
is and
my bad.
no, go ahead. I was just going to ask you a similar question that I wanted to ask about Chicago.
Well, right quick, because like, where does that poverty come from? You know what I mean? In South Africa, because in Chicago, I know and everybody who has listened to this podcast know where I'm about to go with it. So I want I want to know where you feel like that poverty comes from and how we address the root cause of it in the South African context.
Man, funny enough, is the answer is going to be closer to Chicago as well, right? Which is the disenfranchising of people, specific putting people in specific locations. Soweto being geographically far from the major cities and policed heavily as well, that type of thing. Back in the day, so it's the same issue that Chicago particularly has, but where I'm at in my juncture of activism and why I call myself an activist is that I'm no longer looking at the who brought us to where we are now. I'm looking at what we can do in order to change tomorrow. That's what I'm looking at. What I'm focused on is what my contribution is going to be towards the change. And so what that looks like in practice, and why I call it myself an activist, if you go on my LinkedIn, that's my first thing, is that everything is a protest. Where, like, and I hate to be that type of artist, but it's real. Like everything is a protest. Where with Mandula Foundation, we're protesting that poverty by bringing solutions. With what we're doing in Chomi, we're protesting that unemployment by bringing jobs to the people. We do that in a financial sense with financial literacy and that type of thing. So the focus is on being the solution, not necessarily looking at who caused it. But if we're speaking about cause solutions and situations, none is more famous than Chicago, which is infamously named Chirac, right? A moniker which has been rather controversial, a nickname that has been rather controversial, implying that Chicago is like the war that was happening in Iraq and putting that together, based on the type of killing that's happening. One thing that I always get when I say, "Hey, man, I'm South African by way of Chicago," what people like to say is, "Oh man," like the almost immediately like, "What? There's a lot of killing there. What's up with that? What's up with that?" You being so close to that matter and speaking about the where issues come from, could you speak more towards what you believe is happening in Chicago and like what you would do if you're given a magic wand in order to be able to fix it?
Yeah, I mean, in Chicago, people are hurting people, and I know for some people that might sound like it's cliche or it's overused, right? But it's this thing we refuse to acknowledge is that, like, and speaking specifically about America now, right? Like, Black people have been, as you said, disenfranchised, have been oppressed, have been denied their humanity, and then denied political participation, and then denied the right to even amass a fortune on our own and be left alone, right? So, like,
Still happening.
so in the United States, like you asked me specifically about Chicago, right? In Chicago, right, we have these things called restrictive covenant. Like, Chicago, a big part of the Black population moved to Chicago after the Great Migration, which is when a bunch of Black people that were living in the South of the United States and were under the oppression of Jim Crow, which followed slavery, right? Which meant that there was the separate water fountains we see. It was the separate buses or having to sit in the back of the bus for Black people, all the segregation by law, right? Black people were like, we ain't with this. We're trying to go to the North. In the North, there was segregation by fact, de facto segregation, which just meant that it was understood that white people and Black people didn't do the same things in the same places, but it wasn't enforced by law in the same way, right? Or it wasn't codified by law in the same way. It was enforced, right? And so part of the segregation was also restrictive covenants, which meant that they were selling homes in valuable areas of Chicago with the express condition that if you buy this home, you cannot sell it to a Black person after that, right? There were areas of, there's what we know of as redlining, right? Which is selecting specific parts of the city, particularly those with Black people and other people of color, and saying, these are the areas where it's not to be invested in, right? So as the United States tries to, this is all happening in the 1920s after the New Deal, right? And so as the United States tries to recover from the Great Depression and offers white people all of these opportunities for home ownership, which then becomes the number one way that people in America amass wealth, right? And with wealth, safety and status, right? And also political clout and a bunch of other things. Black people are excluded from that. So you exclude Black people from that, you put them in these certain areas. Then when they try and build things like community in whatever you provide them with, whether it's public housing, then you tear that public housing down and disperse people, right? They start to build communities in their schools and you tear those schools down. The largest closings of both public housing and of schools have both occurred within Chicago, right? So when you strip these things that keep communities together and allow the factors that bring people together in informal ways, right? The fact that I look out for the other kids on the block. If I see some kids doing something they're not supposed to be doing, I'm going to let somebody know, right? When you tear down our schools and you tear down the housing, you break those things in community, right? And you don't allow people to work certain jobs. You limit the transportation, even the infrastructure to get downtown where the jobs are. Like, you've completely cut these people off. I'm sorry, I'm talking a lot, but let me give you this analogy, right? Imagine we're all playing Monopoly, and for 400 rounds, you cannot play. And then after 400 rounds of us playing Monopoly, I give you $200 and I say, you good, jump in this game, go ahead and play. You go and look for somebody to get some money from, or some reason, or something.
Go to jail, Blackie.
Yeah, exactly, right? Exactly. So what we're looking at is the situation where we keep as a country and as a city saying we've done enough to help these Black people. We don't know why that they're doing all this violence. But really, we have not done enough to heal the people that have been excluded from this and have had to contribute to all of this wealth building and been excluded from the benefits for hundreds and hundreds of years. And until we address how we've treated those people, until we address the resources that they now need to be whole and come to the table on some kumbaya stuff, on some let's all work together now stuff. We're not whole yet. And part of the reason why I'm pushed you so hard in this conversation about South Africa is like, I think we need to ignite part of repairing the harm that's been done to communities of color by colonialism, by white people, is acknowledging that harm. And like, we keep trying to put the cake in the oven without all the ingredients. And one of the ingredients is acknowledgement. And we're trying to keep putting the cake in the oven and say, we're just going to build wealth out of this. But there are still racist structures in place that destroy our wealth, even when we try and build it, destroy our wealthy people. Acknowledgement is part of that cake that we need to, that we're trying to bake of equality. I ranted enough.
The name of this show is called Acknowledgement Cake.
But you feel me?
I do, and in the same way that you said at the beginning of this is, and we're running long on this, but because we got so much more content to get to, I still would love to hear, Miles has a dream. What is your dream for Chicago?
My dream for Chicago is take seriously movements to fund community-led initiatives to build community. Put the power in the hands of the people. And that doesn't mean that it can't be evidence-based. That doesn't mean that it can't be rigorously evaluated. But we continue to rely on policing. We continue to criminalize and over-surveil communities of color. We continue to, and this is beyond like issues of racism, right? We have to lift up women. We have to stop treating women the way that we treat them. We have to make sure that their voices are heard. Like my dream, if we're keeping it to policy, is like, all right, fine. Fund these people. Fund the people that are doing the work on the ground, and listen to these communities who we all just like love to turn on the TV and be like, oh, it's so sad what's happening there. Listen to what they're saying and implement it, right? It's so much of a deeper conversation than like, if you had a magic wand, what would you do? I would make people take community-led initiatives more as seriously as they take policing. Let's start there.
And until that happens, you can best believe over here on the All the Way Live podcast, we'll continue to highlight the people that are doing that good work. We'll continue to dedicate ourselves towards making sure that those people have a voice, they get acknowledged. And we also like to do a little something called Current News. Yes, sir. So, current news today is particularly serious. After weeks of serious discussions covering all sorts of wars, atrocities, and immigration issues, we had to come up with some light.
We tried to come up with something light, although, fam, we've researched a lot of things on this podcast. Like, I have entered many a Google search into my laptop and phone to curate content for y'all's cranium. Nothing has messed up my algorithms as quickly as Googling why aren't men having enough sex. Like, this was a mind, right?
It gave you suggestions. Come on, man. Hot girls in your city now.
But like, it was like, okay, yeah. Well, first of all, there's a lot of creeps out there, but it was also like I mean, like, seriously, like the personality, like YouTube personalities that people should investigate. But also, like, my ads immediately shifted to like dick pills and just like weird stuff like guns. Like, I'm dead serious. I'm so serious. My YouTube ads switched immediately to like guns and like just all sorts of strangeness, man. Like, which I think to me says there's a community or a profile of person, like people are looking this up, and there's other group of other things that they're looking up, and it's alarming.
Yeah, Viagra and guns immediately after. That's a terrible combination.
Words.
But that being said, what the actual study is, a study came out that 30% less men between the ages of 18 and 30 are having sex 30% less, right? So indicating that there's been a massive decline in the amount of partners that people are having. People specifically were saying, reporting that people have 62 times a year, which that number has gone down to about 54 this year, right? So there is a steep decrease in these numbers that people are seeing across the board, which begs us to have to ask ourselves, in the name of content information and sharing, why is that the case? Why are men specifically having less sex?
You asking me? I don't know.
Dude, you're the expert.
I'm the expert on having sex.
Sexpert.
See, that's my brother. Only my brother would do the due diligence to label me as the expert of not having sex. But hear me now, non-sex expert. All right. I mean, when I jump to like what I really think is going on, like a big part of it is like social media. But it's funny that you put me as the expert because, right, like dating has shifted to the phone, right? And I was actually the person that refused. I've never had Tinder, never had Hinge, never had Bumble, never had Stumbled Upon. You know what I'm saying? Like, I never had any of the dating apps. So it's funny because it's like the culture shifted completely to that. And even now that it's in the palm of your hand, people are having less sex. So that's crazy to me.
But that speaks to a bit of the statistic where they're saying that the increase in social media usage has an increase in anxiety and depression, and both of those things are a counter motivator for people to pursue sex. Some of the studies also saying are the theories around them is the fact that the pursuit of sex, or at least the process of getting in motion forward, because even at the very least, if you want to have sex, you need to be in motion towards it, unless it's right next to you. So there is a mobility and pursuit-esque innate instinct for us to be able to pursue sex in that way. So when you move that towards the phone and you move that towards online, specifically with online porn, what you end up, that's some of the theories that have been brought up. It's the porn, y'all. Shocker.
I was timing how long it took porn to come into this conversation. 3 minutes, not bad.
Yeah, it's kind of obvious when you bring it up like that. It's like better having less sex, but watching a lot more porn.
Yeah, and the technical term that I came across and like checking this out was that the internet has made it really easy to satisfy our social and our sexual needs. And there's not as much incentive to go out and like in the real world to satisfy those needs. And I ain't gonna lie to you, it's been a couple of times where staying at home with the laptop was the right decision. All right.
Amen to that.
That's important to say. But I think there's a question here of like, first of all, wait, men are having less sex, but like, how much sex should we be having? I think there's like an underlying thing that we're always like more, but like, but is that the case? Like, you know what I mean? Like, I think we're conditioned to think like by porn in a lot of ways that we're supposed to be like having sex a lot, you know, and well, and that's not all.
Yeah. Well, the number that I came across is that the average amount of partners that a person has within a lifetime is between 2 and 3. So I know that was my reaction.
Right? Correct. Indeed.
Indeed, that checks out. So that was kind of that was included. You're right. There is a big element of it, which is the porn impact on sex expectation and sexual health. A big part of the number why people are also having less sex, at least with women, is that their first sexual encounters are not pleasant encounters, and therefore associate pain towards that, and end up just staying away from that act because of the initial pain of somebody who did not know what they were doing or were recreating porn scenes and porn like things like choking a woman type thing.
You're saying that that's increasing. Women saying that their first sexual encounter wasn't pleasant. Is it increasing?
No, saying that a reason that women have noted having less sex is the fact that their first experience is not pleasant, and therefore, yeah.
Well, yeah, it's interesting. So, like, when you look at the numbers of people having less sex, and you think about hopefully people being more informed about what consent is, and sex in a lot of ways becoming less taboo in popular culture, you would hope that like consent is being better understood. So maybe a small fraction of these numbers is, like you're saying, women that aren't all the way into it or aren't sure that they want to have sex with this person and are feeling more comfortable saying no, right? In situations where previously, because of the societal pressure we've put on women and the lack of discussion until the last decade or so, right, where if I'm alone with this person and we like each other, I guess we're gonna have sex, like, you know, and maybe hopefully I'm just trying to be optimistic, but maybe part of it is people, understanding like both partners saying no in a context of like, oh, well, we've both got drunk, we're both drinking, but we know that that's not that impedes consent. I'm hoping that maybe some of these numbers are people being more informed and being more conscientious about the types of sex we're having.
Yeah. So part of even the change in the social dynamic, right, is part of it is that the act of approaching people is different. Like we've said, a lot of engagement and interaction is online, and also people have most sex when they're in a relationship, and relationship numbers are decreasing as well. And that's across the board. And part of the reasons that might be able to happen is if you take into account, we have been saying depression, anxiety, those mental health issues on an all-time low, or mental health issues at an all-time high, let me say. And so you factor that into play, and then that gives you a certain element of it. Also, when because of the economy, some people, a lot more men are going now back home to live with their parents and live in the household with their mom, that type of thing. That turns out statistically, gentlemen, is going to decrease your chances.
Your mother certainly hopes so. Respect your mama's house, y'all, for real.
Yeah, you respect your mama's house. But funny enough, another determinant, which I found funny but doesn't necessarily speak to statistic, but more so towards how we end up choosing partners, is that somebody's body odor is one of the largest predeterminers of if somebody's going to find someone attractive or not to be able to sleep with, almost making it a deal breaker.
Interesting. That's funny. I've never thought about that so much in the context of like the initial phases of a relationship, but it is something that like partners have asked for, like, give me something that smells like you. And I'll be like, here go a gym shirt. You know what I mean? Like, as somebody who doesn't really put on like cologne like that, it'd just be the natural berries and juices. But it's funny. And especially now being in a long distance relationship, I've come to understand it more. because like Shorty will leave stuff around the crib, and she's got this one scarf that smells like her, and that's evocative. You know what I mean? It like really smell. I think is one of those underrated senses that we don't really think of as transporting us to a place in the same way that vision, obviously, hearing, and even taste. But that'll do it to you.
Right. So talking about that smell and sense of taste, what they call the bidirectional effect is the time when women and men find each other most attractive. And they did a study was conducted to test that type of thing out, where they would have blind studies that leave men's uh, clothes that smelled like men out, and then a woman would have to choose which one she finds more attractive. And they also did the same thing about a man's symmetry. And it turns out that during a woman's pre-ovulation phase, women will find men more attractive. The same rating she would give a shirt or whatever before would give it after ovulation, it would decrease. But right the moment before, it is heightened. Same thing with taste. What's interesting is that a man finds a woman more attractive too at that same period by doing the same study, smelling her clothes and looking at symmetry. So a man will also find a woman who's more closer to pre-ovulation, more attractive.
And that's the period that immediately precedes her period too. So I do is be so frustrated. You know, she'd be like, "Oh man, you look good." She'd be like, "No." You'd be like, "Oh." But yeah, man, these are funny things. Like it is, I love these conversations too, breaking down some of these like taboos because men don't know enough about female reproductive health. Like we got to break down these barriers to where like, yo, you should know what type of tampons or pads your girl uses and be able to like hook her up if she needs that. Like you like we can be better at just like we all still giggle like we're little, and that's cool to giggling, but we still gotta act grown about it. You know what I mean? We can take care of each other, get tested, a you
That's
know,
a big one.
you,
Please, yo, that's such a big one.
you know what I'm saying? Like people are having less sex, like, and we're getting into a broader conversation of just about sex again in the modern age, which is one of our favorite topics. You know, shout out to the Live Nation who enjoys this content as well. But like, yeah, man, part of it is this is an opportunity, right? Again, I want people, I wish, like, yo, in the comments, tell us what you think. Like, how much sex are we supposed to be having? Maybe we're having less sex because we're thinking more, we're being more selective. In some ways, those can be good things. Now, we have countries and spaces that are examples of what happens when it goes too far. But you know what I'm saying? I just think we all, man, as maybe I'm traumatized from my research, but like the obsessiveness with having sex and using it as a validation for your own like humanity, like as if you deserve it, like that's such a problem. So I guess what I'm trying to introduce is the notion that it's cool not to be out here running through sex on a regular basis. Like that's okay.
I like that. I like that point. It's just like, yo, look, even if you're not what in constant pursuit, skirt chasing, that's cool if you're not doing that. That does not reflect the reality of a majority of men, especially those that are busy, those that are on their grind, those that are preoccupied. You know what I mean? That opportunity of doing that decreases. Now, granted, anything is possible if you put your intention behind it. If you really want to make that a priority, there's many things that you could do in order to be able to increase your level of attractiveness, your exposure to people that you want to get with, because that's also important. Because of how lonely people feel, people are also out here craving intimacy and also craving partnership. So if one, understanding the difference between those two things, intimacy and partnership, but it doesn't take away from the things that people can do in order to get themselves to be more attractive. um it's small things even.
Yeah, and I think, man, you bodied it, right? Like recognize what you're craving, whether it is partnership, whether it is intimacy, whether it is just sex, and recognize that you might have to start with friendship first, or an introduction first, or a straight up rejection first, because
Oh yeah.
that's how a lot of these things start. The landscape is changing. Like we said, a lot of it is moving online. So it's normal to be rejected trying to talk to somebody in person. Be very careful about the way that you try to do that, because the way that we think about even how appropriate that is changing. Not being prescriptive, different things are going to work for different people. But I love what you said about like if you really are, if you feel like you're not having as much sex as you want to be having, think about where you need to start and where the appropriate place to start. And a lot of that is get up, get outside, step away from the laptop and the lotion. You know, you feel me? You feel me?
Definitely step away from the laptop and lotion because there's a addictive characteristic behind that.
There's an addictive characteristic, and I think we're caught in this space, man, like where people, especially young men, feel like, yo, we deserve like sex. If we're good people, if we're good young men, like we should be like, women should throw themselves at us, right? And consent, like on off rip. But the thing is, like, there's a difference between our basic human needs and everybody else being responsible for providing that for you, right? So like, just because you feel the urge to have sex doesn't mean that any woman in your life, in your proximity, is responsible for making that happen for you, right? That's still on you. And there's a possessiveness that I'm seeing, especially in the culture, that comes up as we do a lot of this research, that I don't know. There's more understanding around that that's needed, I think.
That comes from the gamification of sexual attraction and of sexual engagements. Everything has gone digital, so you're able to gamify that. By being able to do that, that reduces one's that reduces the ability to appreciate, for instance, patience, if you will, right? The ability to be able to appreciate courting and the process that it takes to be able to get to know somebody in a way that they then feel comfortable with, allowing you to be intimate with them. And the same thing vice versa. This is not just for men, but you know, it's the same thing for women too. But being able to swipe right and swipe the same fingers and screen we use to play a game is the same fingers and screen we use to choose a mate. And those things are one swipe away, sometimes one command away. And because of how close they are to each other, in order to be able to separate how we approach both of those things becomes difficult. So that's why.
Yeah, man. I think a lot of what we're just saying is just be thoughtful about how the influences that are allowing you, that are controlling these urges. Like, these are powerful urges. Like you said, like on a biological level, these are some of the most powerful urges we have. And when they're influenced by businesses, because that's what porn is a business, right? It's a business that like tries to give you present your fantasy as something that's real without telling you, like, they done took 8 breaks. He done took 12 dick pills. Like, she is not enjoying this. Like, she is saying, like, so they're selling you this thing and making you want to keep coming back to this thing. And it doesn't represent what we should actually be pursuing in real life, right? It's a business. They generating revenue through this. So just be mindful of the ways that what we consume impacts, like, really, really your urges and your body and the way you move it in these streets. Move cautious.
Move cautious. And if the vulnerable is still powerful, and speaking about and then opening up about my own story and like where I'm at, G, same what you're saying about understanding things are urges. That's how my relationship with sex is understanding that it is a urge, much like any other type of urge to eat, because it's something that you can become addicted to, and it also is a endorphin recent. It's an endorphin based endorphin based value that you get once you know that's what you emit in your brain. So that feeling you can get addicted to, which is why porn addiction is so frequent. You know, it's the same thing why people can also become obsessed with the pursuit of sex. That type of thing happens too. So in my life, I'm just trying to be able to regulate all of my urges and controlling them to, you know, trying to be the master of my urges.
Yeah, man. I like that. I like what you said. It's about just being mindful of why you're doing what you're doing, knowing yourself, and yeah, man, keeping it real with yourself for sure. Keeping it real.
Keeping it real.
You know?
Indeed. Mr. Miles Xavier, I think we done served up people a good amount of why people are not having sex. We done told you to put the lotion and laptop away. We gave you that.
Yeah, where else?
Where else? What people love about this show, the favorite part of the show for most people, and the one that keeps people coming back, is a little section that we call Recommended Review.
The Butch coming.
Scary.
This is one of my favorite artists in hip hop right now. This is an artist that like when you the good thing about like when you have a favorite artist in the game is that like his approach I love to the music. So when I hear Benny, all Benny is good Benny to me. Uh this one, Tana Talk 4, is a follow-up to Tana Talk 3. That might be one of the projects that really launched him, really, or at least was coming out when he was hitting his stride. So a much anticipated follow-up. What you think of this one, man? I know you a big Griselda fan.
Big BSF, big Griselda fan. The last live show that me and Miles went to before COVID was the Griselda show in House of Blues, Chicago. So big time, long time fans of Griselda. It's Griselda's at a very particular, interesting point now because there's a bunch of contracts that are expiring at the same time. There's a bunch of people, there's a bunch of new labels that are formulating, and the original structure that was had of Griselda seems to be evolving, which is always great to see. You know, everybody has their own label type of situation. So it's the in leading up to this album dropping, Benny dropped a date on the snippet. You know, we run to every Benny snippet and we share it amongst the groups. We love that type of thing. He dropped that snippet and was like, hey, this is when the album's coming out. We got hyped. We got excited. They changed that date. I think this was his last album on Shady, if I don't recall correctly. But all to say, the fourth installation of the Tana Talk series, Tana Talk 3, arguably being held as Benny's best album. That's the consensus. Is folks are saying Tana Talk 3 is the one. But so coming off of Tana Talk 4, man, we had super high expectations of what to be able to get into it. Did he deliver on the big name series?
I think it depends on what you were looking for. I think Benny is an artist who can do a couple of different things very well, right? He can make the grimiest of the grimiest Buffalo representing hip hop that you want, and he can make a very elegant, classy type of gangster music that I feel like is reminiscent of Rick Ross, and kind of this push to, yeah, really take hip hop to a place where it can represent the streets, but it can also represent success, right? And the production I think on this album represents him trying to showcase his ability to do both. This one, I mean, a Cole feature, that's something different for a Benny the Butcher album, right? A Diddy feature, that's something different from a Benny the Butcher album, right? So I think there was an attempt at a little bit more polish here, that I don't necessarily that doesn't make it my favorite, but I think especially when you talk about lyrically, when you talk about his ability to be sharp and to show that he's in shape with his pen and continue to deliver lyrics and bars that remind us why he is where he is in the game, I definitely think he delivered. I didn't pull as many favorites as I usually do from a Benny album, but hard pressed to say it's bad music, I think.
Yeah, I don't think you could say that at all. And one of the things about Benny is that he's got that it factor where you want to hear everything that he says, which is a very unique attribute to have as a rapper, where no matter what you're on or what it is you're saying, people feel it, they believe it, and they want to listen to what it is you're saying. What is it that this dude is saying? So, and if that is if that is his greatest attribute, then he continues that run since Tana Talk 3. He's put out 7 different projects that have come out. Plugs I Met 2, that Pyrex Picasso, personally, I think, which is the album that precedes this that we did cover, is one of my favorite offerings of from Benny the Butcher recently. I love what he's doing with El Camino. I love what he's doing with 38 Special, and I think it's super dope, you know? So coming off of this, I think the big name, which is Tana Talk 3, which is a flawless classic album that he put out. I don't think anybody would disagree that Tana Talk 3 is not only his best work, but a classic album. You know, it belongs on vinyl. That's timeless hip hop. The beats were brand new. The by brand new, there was just from a whole different type of sound at the time. You know, granted they were making that type of music before, but Derringer and Alchemist stepping through on Tana Talk 3 was the first time you hear broken bottles. You know, you can't believe what it is that you're hearing. And I think people were expecting that walking into this type of album. Still, like any time Benny puts out an album, man, I enjoy a lot of what he does. Like you said, I don't know if this would particularly I enjoy Pyrex Picasso personally a bit more than that, but there's like any other Benny album that he gives me, there's songs in here that I'm gonna pick out and probably keep listening to for a while.
I think what's dope about Benny is like you named some projects that like you that I don't disagree are classics and are high up there, but like I think everybody else takes something different from each Benny album, right? And so like I really liked Burden of Proof. That one didn't get as much love as I as much as I cared for it. Plugs I Met Too is the Benny album that I have on vinyl that I think is the one that like you that especially on vinyl, the way that that music is put together, I think that's the one, right? So I imagine that there's somebody to whom this is the joint. Maybe it's a J. Cole fan, right?
Mm-hmm.
But maybe it's a 38 Special fan. I love the versatility. So I'm again like this is good music. A couple of my highlights: Back Two Times, Stove God. If it ain't Benny, it's Stove at the top of my list. Stove goes.
Yep.
So Back Two Times is a highlight for me. Weekends in Paris. I really liked Uncle Bun with 38 Special and Guerrero, which actually does a lot of referencing to Tana Talk 3 and a lot of the albums that came after it. He's kind of Hall of Fame in it on Guerrero. So yeah, man, I think this is a dope album. I think we all have our favorites of Benny. You know.
Indeed. And I'm glad that you mentioned that Guerrero, because as a Benny the Butcher fan, being able to listen to all those drops, paying homage to some of the last pieces of work that he's done was super cool. The second half of this album for me rides so smooth, from Billy Joe all the way down to Mr. Childs Hall. Back to Time is Dumb. The snippet that he dropped on Instagram sounded different than this, and I like that. I like the burst that he had on the snippet for that Back Two Times, man. That this ain't what you want. That's what we wanted, man.
It's the curse of a true hip hop head. If you heard things that you weren't supposed to hear, now you want to hear. Now you want to hear more. But yeah, man, I'm appreciative of this man dropping music. This is an artist that I really want to see it live now that things are happening again. So I hopefully get the chance to do that. Maybe this summer, this fall with my brother. Who knows? Let us know what type of shows that y'all would want to go to. A lot of music came out this week, so we know we could get to the Dave East. We know we could get to the Durkio. As a Chicago podcast, we might have to do that. Let us know what y'all want to hear.
We might just have to circle back to that Durkio next week because it is special. Man, Mr. Miles Xavier, I think it is that we know.
Oh, we know. Clocking in at an hour 23. If you are hearing the soulful sounds of Chestnut and me, then we know that you could be anywhere in the world, but have chosen to rock with us, have chosen to listen to our content, have chosen to see if there was something that you could find out or see if at least there was some funny to brighten your day. We hope you found whatever you was looking for. We hope you enjoy the celebration of celebrating. We hope you enjoy the celebration of love, of happiness, of how good it feels to be Black. Don't it feel good, way?
Blessed about it.
Blessed about it. We say that every week because we are connecting the diaspora over here, but we are also taking care of each other. We talked a lot about what we do. We hope we say that humbly. We wanted to share a little bit about ourselves, share a little bit of us with you. It's not something we do easily or lightly, so we hope it didn't come off too vain, but we just wanted to put that out there. So care for yourself. You have some self-care that you need to do. You be working hard, so I need you to eat something delicious. I need you to hug somebody you love. I need you to tell the people peace, water, and there we go.
Come on, man.
Yeah, I get that, but is we live though? Is we like all